It started as a quiet walk in the park, but when a stranger handed Barron Trump a cryptic letter, everything changed. What he discovered inside shocked him, and what he did next left everyone absolutely speechless. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the sun peeked through golden leaves, casting long shadows on the ground. The air smelled faintly of dry leaves and the earth below them, a scent that reminded Barron of simpler times. He liked days like this, calm, unassuming, and quiet. He had walked to the park by himself, a small escape from the world that always seemed to follow him. The park was alive but peaceful. A group of children played tag near the swings, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Joggers passed by, their rhythmic steps blending into the background noise of chirping birds and rustling leaves. Nearby, an older man sat on a bench, tossing breadcrumbs to a cluster of pigeons. It was the kind of scene that felt ordinary but comforting, like a picture you'd find in an old storybook. Barron strolled along the cobblestone path, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket. He had come here to think, to get away from the pressure of always being watched. Here, in the park, he was just another face in the crowd, or so he thought. As he walked past the fountain at the center of the park, he noticed a man sitting alone on a bench, hunched over as if he were guarding something. The man looked ordinary at first, gray coat, worn-out shoes, and a weathered baseball cap that shaded his face. But something about him made Barron hesitate. Maybe it was the way the man's eyes flicked up and seemed to follow him, or maybe it was how tightly he gripped the envelope in his hands, as if it carried the weight of the world. Barron slowed his pace, pretending to admire the fountain as he tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. But as he turned to continue down the path, the man stood up. His movements were deliberate, but not aggressive, like someone trying not to scare off a stray cat. He called out softly, just loud enough for Barron to hear. "Young man," the stranger said, his voice gravelly but steady, "I think this is for you." Barron stopped in his tracks. His curiosity piqued. The man held out the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. Barron hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the park continued as if nothing unusual was happening. "Please," the man added, his voice louder, causing Barron to shrink. "Please." Barron hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. "Please, it's important." Barron stepped closer, his heart beating a little faster. He looked at the man, then at the envelope. It was plain, almost too plain. White, with no markings or names, just a faint crease of something tucked inside. "What is it?" Barron asked cautiously. "You'll understand," the man said cryptically, "but only if you read it." The world around them seemed to fade as Barron reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavier than it should, as though it carried more than just paper. The man nodded once, then turned and walked away, leaving Barron standing alone by the fountain, the mysterious envelope clutched tightly in his hand. Barron stared at the envelope in his hand, turning it over carefully. It didn't have a name or any markings to show who it was meant for, yet the man had been so sure it was for him. His footsteps slowed as he moved to a bench near the fountain, the quiet splashing of water blending into the background noise of the park. He wasn't sure if he should open it. What if it was something dangerous, or meant for someone else? But the man's pleading eyes lingered in his mind, urging him to take a look. After a moment's hesitation, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. The words written on it were shaky, like someone had been in a rush, or maybe their hands weren't steady. It read, "The answers you're looking for are in the old library. Find the red journal. It's yours now." Barron frowned, reading the message again. The words didn't make sense. Answers? What answers? And why a red journal? He didn't even know what the old library was. He glanced around the park, hoping to catch another glimpse of the man, but he was gone, lost in the crowd of people walking through the park. For the rest of the afternoon, Barron tried to push the note out of his mind. He walked through the park, stopped by a coffee shop, even checked his phone a few times, but his thoughts kept circling back to the letter. What if it was something important? What if the man needed help? Or worse, what if something bad was going to happen? Finally, he gave in to his curiosity. Barron opened a search app on his phone and typed in "old library near me." A single result popped up. a small, run-down building about 2 miles away. It didn't even have a full name, just the old library listed under historical sites. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Was this worth it? The logical side of his mind told him to forget about it, to toss the envelope and move on. But something deeper, a gut feeling he couldn't ignore, told him he had to go. That evening, as the sun dipped lower and cast the park in golden light, Barron made his decision. He called for a car, giving the driver the address of the old library. The ride was quiet, but his mind raced. Why had the man chosen him? What was in that journal? And what answers was he supposed to find? When the car pulled up to the library, Barron's chest tightened. The building was small and weathered, its brick walls darkened with age. The windows were clouded, and the wooden door had scratches and faded paint. It didn't look like anyone had been here in years. The driver glanced back at him. "You sure this is the place?" Barron nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. Yeah. Stepping out of the car, he walked toward the library's entrance. The air was cooler here, heavier, like the building carried its own atmosphere. He tried the door, and to his surprise, it opened easily with a low creak. Inside, the library was dimly lit, with shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, their surfaces covered in layers of dust. The faint smell of old paper and wood filled the air. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. Barron's footsteps echoed softly as he stepped further in, his eyes scanning the shelves for any sign of the red journal mentioned in the note. At first, he didn't see anything unusual, just rows of books, some leaning at odd angles, as if they had been forgotten for years. But then, tucked in the far corner of a shelf near the back, a small red spine caught his eye. It was just as the note had described. A red journal, its leather cover cracked with age. Barron reached for it, his hand hesitating for a split second before he pulled it from the shelf. The journal was surprisingly light, but as he held it, he felt that same strange weight, the sense that whatever was inside could change everything. His hands trembled as he opened it. The first page was blank, but the second had a name written in neat, looping handwriting, "For those who seek the truth." And beneath that, a single question: "Are you ready to know who you really are?" Barron's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a random journal, it was personal. Too personal. His heart pounded as he turned the next page, bracing himself for what he might find. Barron's hands trembled as he flipped through the journal. Each page felt heavier than the last, as if the words themselves carried a hidden weight. Most of the pages were filled with careful handwriting, but they weren't ordinary notes or random thoughts. They were instructions, clues, and questions that seemed to speak directly to him. What are you running from? Who would you do if the truth was right in front of you? What would you do if the truth was right in front of you? He couldn't make sense of it, but he couldn't put it down either. The handwriting shifted styles on some pages, as if more than one person had contributed to this mysterious book. And then, near the middle, he found a map. It wasn't detailed, just a rough sketch of a nearby neighborhood with a small X marked on one corner. Barron frowned, running his finger over the page. The location wasn't far. He recognized the street name. But why was it in the journal? What was he supposed to find there? As he stepped out of the library into the cool night air, his mind raced. He glanced around, half expecting the man from the park to appear out of nowhere and explain everything. But the street was empty, lit only by a flickering street lamp a few steps away. He walked briskly toward the marked location, clutching the journal tightly under his arm. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to turn back, but his curiosity was louder. What if this was something important? What if someone needed help? Or what if this was meant for him? The streets grew quieter as he approached the address. A small, run-down house stood at the end of the block, its windows dark and its porch sagging with age. The X on the map matched perfectly. This was the place. Barron hesitated at the gate. His breath was visible in the cold night air, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, he considered turning back. But then he remembered the man's words. "It's important." Summoning his courage, Barron pushed the gate open. It creaked loudly, shattering the stillness of the night. He walked up the short, uneven path to the front door and knocked lightly. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. His hand hovered over the doorknob. Was it worth it? Should he just leave? But before he could decide, the door creaked open a few inches on its own. The inside was dark, and a faint smell of old wood and dampness drifted out. "Hello?" Barron called, his voice shaky but steady enough to echo in the empty house. "Is anyone here?" Silence. He stepped inside cautiously, every creak of the floorboards beneath his feet sending a chill up his spine. The living room was sparse. Just an old couch, a coffee table covered in dust, and a stack of books piled in the corner. On the wall, faded family photos hung crookedly, their colors washed out with age. Barron's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a small box sitting on the coffee table. It was wooden, with carvings etched into its sides. The carvings were intricate, symbols he didn't recognize, but they seemed familiar somehow, like they were on the edge of his memory. Setting the journal down, Barron reached for the box. His fingers hesitated over the latch before he flipped it open. Inside was a single photograph and a folded piece of paper. The photo was black and white, showing two men standing together. One of them was young, maybe in his early 20s, and the other, Barron froze. The older man in the photo was the same man who had handed him the envelope at the park. "What is going on?" Barron muttered under his breath, his heart pounding. He unfolded the piece of paper. The handwriting was the same as the journal. "If you're reading this, it means you found your way here. Good. The truth is close. Trust yourself, and trust the people who brought you here." Barron stared at the note, his mind spinning. Who were these people? Why had the man at the park singled him out? And what was this truth they kept talking about? Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Barron's heart leapt into his throat. He spun around, his eyes darting to the dark hallway leading to the back rooms. "Hello?" he called again, louder this time. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't care. A figure stepped into the dim light of the living room. It was a woman, her face shadowed but her posture calm. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You're earlier than I expected," she said simply, her voice soft but steady. Barron took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to leave. But something about her presence stopped him. She didn't seem dangerous. If anything, she seemed tired. "Who are you?" Barron demanded, his voice firmer now.